already. And I appreciate you asking about what Sharon and I have going on. We're working on a new book. I've got a book that's forthcoming. It's been ready for a while. We're still waiting for the printer because, as with everything else in America right now, supply chain is disrupted. So I don't think we're even going to run programs on Skywatch TV about my next book, which is called The Second Coming of Saturn, until I think February. We're going to go on Jim Baker about it before we go on Skywatch TV about it, interestingly. Amazon shows it November 15th. If we see it by then, great. But again, we're not bringing it out to Skywatch until February. But our next book that we're working on together is tentatively titled The Gates of Hell. And this is just sort of a ongoing research. As we research for a book, we get done with a book, and then we realize there's stuff we wanted to put in that book. It's like, okay, well, I guess we'll have to roll this into the next book. And but it's not that we're trying to come up with things to just write more books. It's that as we dig into the Bible, we keep finding more stuff that we hadn't known until after we turned in the manuscript to the editor. And that's because you're never going to run out of stuff in the Bible to learn. I have come to believe that the reason I thought the Bible was boring when I was a kid is because the churches we attended didn't bother telling us that. Well, they avoided the weird parts, first of all, and they didn't really focus on some of the other stuff that they did sort of touch on and how it was relevant to us today, like demons and the gods that in the Bible God calls gods. It just, we didn't really deal with any of that. If you want to get a kid excited about the Bible, have them read Job chapter 41 and then ask them, what's Job describing there? It's a dragon. Yeah, dragons are real. What do you know about that? Yeah, church would have been a lot cooler when I was 12 years old if we had, had that kind of teaching in Sunday school. So anyway, the gates of hell, we're looking at this very long practice of summoning entities from the netherworld and the existence of portals. But our contention is going to be that it's not so much there are physical locations on the earth that can be identified as portals. The portal is right here in your chest. If you invite them in, they will come. That's the portal. So we're going to deal with that in the book. And of course, Sharon will then take that research and weave some very interesting stories about it for her Red Wing saga. She's working on her 8th novel in that series right now. On top of that, we're blessed in that Tom Horn has given us kind of free rein to create topics for a new show for which he's built us a really awesome set that looks like Sherlock Holmes' library. And it's called The Bible's Greatest Mysteries. And we've had I think this coming week we'll release our 4th program interviewing Timothy Alberino. We've got Aaron Lipkin coming up for about 5 programs where we'll talk about Gilgal Rephaim and Joshua's altar and some other really cool stuff. L.A. Marzulli, we've got 4 interviews recorded with him already, 4 with Dr. Michael Heiser. And we've got the archaeologists who are digging at a site in Jordan that they've convinced us is the site of ancient Sodom. And they've got the scientific evidence to prove it. So some really cool stuff and when travel opens up, we plan to get out with Jeannie, you saw us with our iPhones and our iPads. We'll probably be doing something similar to that, but Tom might actually send a cameraman this time so that both of us could be in the shot instead of just one or the other. But we're talking with a travel company about going to Turkey in 2022 and visiting the churches of Revelation. There's a site near Pergamum called Hierapolis, which has a site called the Plutonion, which is a fancy way of calling it the gates of hell. So obviously, in conjunction with the book, we have to visit the gates of hell. But we also want to go to Göbekli Tepe, which archaeologists have been calling the oldest temple in the world. Dr. Judd Burton, our friend, has written a book with another friend, Dr. Aaron Judkins, on the Watchers and Göbekli Tepe. And this is in southeastern Turkey. Thing is, they found another site that's not far from there called Karahan Tepe that's even older. So we worked up a tour itinerary, and both of those sites would be on this tour. We just now need to find a way to slot it into our schedule. We still want to go back to Israel next year, but we're not sure what the Israel's Ministry of Tourism is going to do. So thankfully, Aaron Lipkin, who runs the tours to Israel for us, isn't going to hold anybody up if for example, they say you got to have a vaccine to go. If you want your money back, you're out. So that's, you don't lose anything if we have to reschedule, or if, which I don't anticipate, because neither Sharon nor I is interested in taking the vaccine, but if God makes it clear to us that, look, I've got things I want you to see over there, and this is the only way you're going to do it, God would have to make it very clear to us that that's what he wants, but we're not going to ask anyone to inject the experimental gene serum to follow us. So, and Aaron is not going to hold on to anyone's deposit if that's their reason for not wanting to go. So anyway, that's kind of what's on the horizon. More books. I've got a board here with 4 more book ideas up there, and Sharon's got, another 12 novels planned out in her series. So as long as we can breathe and type, we'll be creating content. And God bless Tom Horn, Joe Horn, the Horn family, because they seem to like what we're doing, and so they are giving us a place to do it, and we are truly blessed. So the stuff we've been working on and looking at for the daily news analysis that I do, the program, 5 and 10, which usually turns out to be closer to 5 and 20, because it's like my dad used to say, when you ask Derek the time, he tells you how to build a watch. And I prove it every day. They seem to fall into several categories, and I'm just going to touch on these real quick. And these are stories that have pretty much just been in the news, or at least on my radar, within the last 72 hours or so. But they're falling into general categories. So I'll kind of run through some of these stories, what I think they mean, and then what these categories mean in terms of what the globalists, i.e. the Luciferians, are trying to push us into. You were talking about vaccines when I logged in. I get criticism on social media for raising legitimate questions and pointing to studies that are raising legitimate questions about the vaccines. There's one troll on Twitter who I really annoy him, because I haven't blocked him, because that would give him the satisfaction of having annoyed me to the point where I'd blocked him. I just mute him, so I never see his tweets, because I was wasting too much time trying to argue with somebody who doesn't want to, hear reason. So he sees everything that I tweet. I don't see anything he tweets. And so now he's the one who's spinning his wheels instead of me spinning my, pearls before swine, that kind of thing. Anyway, on the other side, we have not been as critical of the vaccines as some other folks would like. So we're kind of in the middle here. My view is this: there are really, really legitimate reasons to not want to take this vaccine. Any of the vaccines, the mRNA vaccine, the attenuated virus with the adenovirus delivery mechanism. And Sharon was asking these questions last February, when it was Donald Trump who was promoting the vaccine. So this is not a political thing. This is not a red-blue thing where I'm concerned. Those who are criticizing me on Twitter for raising questions assume that it's because I'm a conservative Christian that I'm no. Go back and look at Sci Friday, the program that we were producing up until the end of this past year. We were asking questions about this last February, because it's a coronavirus, and coronaviruses, mRNA viruses, they mutate really fast. Sharon called it last February. They will never, she said, create a vaccine that will effectively wipe out this disease, because it will mutate faster than they can create new vaccines. And so far, she is absolutely right. And because of that, we are seeing now the director of the CDC, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, saying, well, we may have to change the definition of what it means to be fully vaccinated. That's a nice way, a politically expedient way of saying, we weren't really telling you the truth when we told you last November that these vaccines were 95% effective. When Pfizer put out its press release, and the CDC and the FDA said, oh, that's great. mRNA, okay, we've known about the technology for 30 years, but it's never been approved for human use because there are legitimate questions about what's going to happen long term. Now, I will say mRNA does not change your DNA, but we don't know what it does long term because there is no long-term data. Usually, vaccines are tested between 5 and 10 years before they're released. The shortest that I could ever find was a 4-year vaccine turnaround from launch through testing to approval. These were released onto the public in less than a year. What we are seeing around the world right now is the world's largest human trial in history. And I just don't want to be part of that. Neither does Sharon. And Sharon's got a degree in molecular biology. So, don't trust me. I've got an econ degree. What do I know? But she's understanding the science. She's the one who was saying a year ago, this will never work. It's not going to work. And now the CDC director is in effect admitting that it doesn't work because, well, we knew that we told you you had to take 2 jabs to be fully vaccinated, but that may now not be enough. This is already the case in Israel, by the way, where they had the green pass. If you got your 2 jabs of your Pfizer vaccine and now you got to get a 3rd jab, and then 6 months from now, you might have to get another jab because hard data, the science that they keep telling us to follow is showing that the effectiveness of the vaccines are dropping rapidly to the point where a year after your 2 jabs, your risk of catching COVID is about the same as if you're just walking around unvaccinated. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the 1 jab vaccine, which is the attenuated virus, that's even, the effectiveness wears off even further than the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So now they're saying, okay, and I'm getting a little worked up here because this disconnect between logic and reality and what the media is telling us. The media is gaslighting us. It's just that you all are intelligent enough to realize it. Most folks out there, many of whom are very close to me, family members who still believe that the mainstream media is generally telling the truth, even the ones who supported Donald Trump, generally when it comes to vaccines, well, they wiped out polio, so vaccines must be good, right? Anyway, what they are telling us now is that if you think you've been fully vaccinated, you haven't been. And to be fully vaccinated, you're going to have to get booster jabs forever. And this is the reality that they're trying to sell us. They already changed the definition of what a vaccine does. It used to be on the CDC website until September 1st. Somebody spotted this. Until September 1st, the definition of a vaccine was an injection or a substance that generated immunity from a disease within the body. And the CDC quietly changed the definition. So now the official definition of vaccine
on tonight.
Excuse me?
Every one of these people like Celeste,
Yeah.
Doug, and
Anyway,
Mike, mute Alice, please, honey.
they're like the
Alice, honey, you need to mute your, thanks.
Anyway, they changed the definition. So now they say it just stimulates an immune response. It doesn't provide immunity. It just stimulates an immune response. But again, as we've seen over the months with the research from the Mayo Clinic and the Israeli Health Ministry, in other words, not right-wing anti-vax conspiracy theory sites, the effectiveness of the vaccine wears off. So now they're saying, okay, if you want to be fully vaccinated, booster jabs forever. But this is going to cause labor shortages. This is the thing that to me is so incompetent that it must be deliberate, or at least that's the way, because that explanation makes more sense to me. We got labor shortages all over the country. Truckers, according to a recent study, we're about 80,000 truckers short of what we need right now in America to handle our transportation needs. There is a negative unemployment rate for truckers in the United States. That's why and this is not a new thing. This has been ongoing for a while. When I was still selling steel, outside sales for a steel company 10 years ago, our company was offering a $10,000 sign-on bonus for guys who'd be willing to drive truck for us. So this is not a new thing, but the Biden administration is talking about vaccine mandates for long-haul truckers. Now, these are the guys who all through the pandemic kept the supply chains going when we all had to stay home and we could only order stuff from Amazon or Walmart or wherever. And these truck drivers were the ones taking goods to the distribution centers and driving the UPS and the FedEx trucks, bringing the stuff to our houses. Except a lot of these truckers would pull up at a distribution center and they'd have to stay in their cab. Guy's got to use the bathroom. He's been drinking coffee to stay awake. There's a bathroom right on the other side of that door. Can't get out of the truck because regulations say you can't. These guys kept things going, kept us from running out of stuff on our store shelves and our pantries for the last 18 months. And now the Biden administration is telling America's truck drivers, yeah, you're going to have to take the jab. And according to a couple of surveys that I saw today, 30% of America's truckers say that they would seriously consider quitting before taking the vaccine. We already have a shortage of truck drivers The Biden administration wants to make it worse, just in time for the holidays. How brilliant is that? Police. In the city of Chicago, 35% of the cops don't want to take the vaccine. Mayor Lightfoot is making threats she hasn't followed through yet, but we'll see how long those police officers want to stay on the job with a mayor who doesn't support them anyway. She's coming up with these these mask mandates that she violates herself, like many of these big city mayors. You've got, and Chicago's not the only one. Seattle, where they were saying we can't afford to lose one more officer, and then they lost 300 on Monday because they wouldn't comply with Mayor Jenny, what's her name's vaccine mandate. You got the 20% of our military not vaccinated. And there are some rumors now, and some who are saying, yeah, that we've heard this and it appears to be true, threats of dishonorable discharges if they don't take the vaccine. Now, you're talking about a population that theoretically is among the youngest and healthiest group of people in the country. I mean, physical training, to be in the military, they're supposed to be in pretty good shape. And statistically, again, the science shows that those people are virtually at no risk whatsoever from this virus, and yet it is being pushed. You've also got EMS and 9/11, first responders, EMTs. We've got a shortage. In fact, this was a testimony in front of Congress a couple of weeks ago where representatives told the representatives of Congress and senators that the 911 system here in the United States is really fragile. There's been a staffing shortage for 911 dispatchers for years, and the vaccine mandate is threatening to make this work. We're seeing the public health, public safety being sacrificed in the name of public health, but the numbers don't add up. It doesn't make sense when you look at a disease that, according to, again, the science, peer-reviewed, published academic studies finding the infection fatality rate of this disease across the entire world. So we're talking about nations where their nutrition and healthcare is not nearly as good as it is here in the US, the UK, Western Europe. Across the entire planet, the infection fatality rate is 0.28%. In other words, it's 99.7% survivable. Now, I say that knowing full well that we've had several friends here that have very recently succumbed to COVID. This is not a disease to laugh at. It is not a fake disease. It's like in terms of its lethality, it's like a really nasty strain of flu. But when you look back at 1918, 1919, the great influenza, I mean, you're talking an infection fatality rate now of 0.3%. The great Spanish flu, the great influenza, they estimate the infection fatality rate is between 2.5% and 5%. 2.5% and 5%. Up to 50 million people died on a planet with a lot fewer people than we have in the world today. But when you go back and look up pictures on the internet of the 1918 World Series or the 1919 World Series, stands were full. We did not shut down the country. The world did not shut down over the great influenza. But now we're so risk averse that apparently we try to eliminate all risk and all suffering. It's just, I'm sorry, it's not practical. It is not possible. It is not even desirable to do this. There's a new study that was published this week, just a couple of days ago, showing that there's no correlation at all between a country's vaccination rate. And this study looked at on a country by country basis around the world, but also here in the United States on a county by county level. No correlation between the vaccination rate and the rate of new COVID infection per million people. In other words, you got nations like Israel, where 70% are vaccinated, having the highest rate of new COVID infections on Earth. And then you've got other nations like South Africa, Vietnam, where you've got like 10% of the people vaccinated with very low infection rates. But then you've also got some countries with low vaccination rates and high infection rates, and others with. So, the point is, the rate of vaccination is really not doing anything to slow the spread or even change the spread of the disease. Virus, gonna virus. And that's what it comes down to. So we're gonna have to trust in God, wash your hands, keep your fingers away from your eyes and your mouth, supplement vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C. Well, you know the routine. We need to be responsible for our own health. And if somebody wants to get the vaccine, my mother's vaccinated. She's 84 years old. She's of that generation that believes that anyone in a white coat has got to be telling the truth. Well, God bless her. But in her situation at age 84, even though she's healthy now, for her, the risk reward makes sense when you analyze it. I mean, the risk of COVID to her is high enough that taking the vaccine makes sense. Me, I'm praying that I live long enough to worry about long-term side effects. So I have no intention of taking the vaccine. And to show you the foolishness, again, of this thing, and again, proving that my wife is the smartest person I know, that she was correct about this just not being possible to kill this coronavirus with a vaccine because it changes too rapidly. Just today, Nature, a peer-reviewed scientific journal, Nature, published a new study showing that there's a new variant out there that's called A30. It doesn't have a Greek letter name yet. It's so new. It turned up in Tanzania, I think, is the first place it was found. It turned up in Sweden and a couple of other places. And the title of the paper basically is the bottom line. The spike protein of SARS-CoV-2 variant A.30 is heavily mutated and evades vaccine-induced antibodies with high efficiency. That's it. There's a new variant out there where the spike protein has changed so much that the antibodies produced by the Pfizer, and they specifically named them, Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca vaccines, no protection. So now what? Interestingly, the authors of the paper speculated and said, well, maybe, and I'm trying to read through the science ease. I've got to wait till tomorrow to show it to Sharon because I think this is what it means. But they actually suggested that a cocktail mixing the vaccines might provide protection. Like, wait a minute. If none of these three provide any protection, how is mixing them together going to provide antibodies that will protect you against? That makes no sense. Oh, wait, you want to get funding, don't you, for your, okay, I see what you're doing there. But this is the reality. We're not going to get away from COVID. SARS-CoV-2, this virus, is here to stay. And as Sharon said when we were talking about this last spring, yes, it will become more transmissible, as the Delta variant showed, but it will become less deadly. Delta variant, that's what viruses do. So what happens when they can't scare us anymore with COVID? Well, just in time, here comes the COP26 climate summit for the United Nations in Glasgow that opens up this weekend. Halloween, appropriately enough, runs through November 12th. A UN official was quoted in an interview as saying that if we don't curb our greenhouse gas emissions, we will suffer anarchy, starvation, mass migration, terrorism, rises in crime. In other words, dogs and cats living together. Go to the World Economic Forum website. This is exactly the playbook that the World Economic Forum has laid out, weforum.org. They tell us when we beat the virus, when the pandemic ends, we'll have to confront climate change because it is an existential threat to humanity. Okay, this is it. They are trying to frighten you and me into accepting a global government. That's what this is all about. John Kerry, our climate envoy, who no doubt is flying a private jet to Glasgow, said that the COP26 summit is the last best hope for the world to get its act together. How often have we heard that over the last decade? We got 2 more years to lower our temperature by 2 degrees. So okay, what next? But here's the thing. The Green New Deal is not going to look the way AOC thinks it's going to look. It's going to look like the mess in Los Angeles and Long Beach. You've seen the pictures of what's happening there at the ports, Los Angeles, Long Beach, the 2 big ports where we take in most of the containers from China. They're calling it Containergeddon. Containergeddon. This is due at least in part to new, tougher emissions standards passed by the state of California on trucks. Because of these standards, which were agreed to last fall by the EPA with the state of California, about half of America's tractor trailer rigs can no longer enter the state of California. So last week, in a great show, a great theatrical production, Joe Biden, Pete Buttigieg, our transportation secretary, who came in from his 2-month paternity leave, made a big show of saying, we've convinced the directors of the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach to work round the clock, 24/7, to offload these container ships, because there was like 167 container ships backed up 40 miles out to sea in the Pacific. It was estimated 500,000 containers full of cargo, 500,000 containers. So now they're taking these containers off the ship 24/7. The longshoremen are happy because they're making overtime, but they're running out of places to stack the containers now, because you can't get the trucks into the port fast enough, because half the trucks in America can't enter California. And this has been ongoing because they already, even before last year's new deal with the EPA, a lot of American truckers were not allowed inside California. But there was a story CBS Los Angeles ran last week showing a neighborhood just outside the Port of Long Beach, where folks woke up last Monday morning, tried to get to work, and oh, there's a container blocking my driveway, because the trucking company in the neighborhood has run out of space in their yard to stack containers. So this is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, and it's avoidable. This is a government-created problem. The Green New Deal for China, how's it working out for them? Well, they shut down a bunch of coal-fired power plants there to at least make a show of trying to comply with greenhouse gas emissions. And now they've got rolling blackouts hitting some of their most important factory towns. China is now ramping up coal mining and coal-fired power plants in order to solve the problem. And by the way, President Xi is not going to the COP26 summit, which tells you he's putting China first. I wish somebody would put America first, huh? Anyway, coal-fired power plants here in the US actually increasing power generation for the first time since 2014. Why? Because renewables aren't reliable. You're not going to power all those new electric vehicles that you want on the road by 2035 with solar energy or with windmills. It's not going to happen. The irony here is that the Chinese have such a demand for coal, and India too. They have such a demand for power that they cannot meet themselves, that the American coal industry is now seeing a bit of a resurgence after Obama practically beat it to death. I mean, when I was working outside sales in Southern Illinois, which is a huge coal mining region, the coal miners there hated Barack Obama. I mean, I wasn't happy that Barack Obama was president, but they hated Barack Obama because he was threatening their ability to provide for their families. There was one of our customers that I called on in, well, I won't name the town. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but it was a big plant that made big mining equipment, and thankfully a lot of it with our steel. On the side of the building in letters literally 20 feet high, fire Obama, because they were convinced that the Obama administration was on the QT, under the table, subsidizing the natural gas industry at the expense of coal. And that may be true, but while I was there, thankfully, coal did pretty well. We moved just before things really fell off the table for coal, but now coal is coming back. Why? Because it's dependable, it's relatively cheap, we have a lot of it, and there are countries out there that want to buy it from us. So thanks to President Xi in China, Illinois coal miners are finding, are going back to work now. Targets for electrical vehicles. I want to talk about this because, again, this is one of those things where the virtue signaling of progressives just drives me bananas. Targets for electric vehicles. We've got California that wants to, all new vehicles in California have to be, what is it, by 2035, new cars and trucks have got to be electric. New York State is doing the same thing, or the United Kingdom has got another, all new cars and buses have to be electric by 2035. Here's the thing. We're already seeing shortages of critical metals needed for the production of electric vehicles, specifically batteries. Lithium. We're seeing lithium shortages. The price of lithium has doubled over the last 12 months. And here's the other thing. 60% of the world's lithium processing capacity is in China. I don't think they're going to want to help out California, New York, or the United Kingdom with our lithium supply problems, at least not without paying for it. Cobalt, another critical metal in production of electric vehicles. Cobalt is not mined directly. It's mainly produced as a byproduct of copper. So cobalt production really depends on the price of copper. But, of course, an electric vehicle, you need a lot of copper for the wiring and stuff. So that's probably okay. But here's the thing. There was a study published a few months ago by researchers in the UK, guys who are scientists who look at stuff like this and know what they're talking about, and understand that the numbers I'm giving you here relate only to the electric vehicle targets put forward by the government of the United Kingdom. Okay, government of the United Kingdom, population about 60 million, which is roughly equal to what, the state of California? So just start running those numbers in your head when you hear this, just for the UK, which plans to have all new vehicles sold in the UK by 2035 would be electric vehicles, based on the most up-to-date battery technology, what they call the 811 technology, 80% nickel, 10% cobalt, 10% manganese. Demand in the UK alone for electric vehicle batteries would require half of the world's amount of neodymium produced globally each year. That's just for the United Kingdom. If you add California to the UK by 2035, that would be the entire world's supply of neodymium. New York, you're out of luck. China, forget it. The amount of lithium required globally annually, just for the United Kingdom, 3/4 of the world's lithium, which again will be tough because 60% of it's in China, and at least half of the world's copper. Again, this is just to meet the demand in the UK for new vehicles, which is only like 2.5 million vehicles a year. There are that many, easily that many sold just in California alone, much less the rest of the United States. To make the 2.5 million new cars sold each year in the UK electric, quote, will require the United Kingdom to annually import the equivalent of the entire annual cobalt needs of European industry, end quote. They would have to suck up everything that would normally go to the rest of the European Union just to supply the new cars, the electric cars needed in the United Kingdom. The extra power required for all UK vehicles to be electric would require a 20% increase over current generation levels. Okay, where does all that new electricity generation come from? To produce this electricity with environmentally friendly wind farms would require an extra 6,000 wind turbines, the production of which would require an entire year's worth of the total global copper supply and 10 years worth of global neodymium. You see what's happening here. The United Kingdom is not the biggest automobile market on planet Earth. It's not even as big as the state of California. And we're already saying, wait a minute, this is not going to be possible. They want to do this within 15 years. And somehow we're going to need to ramp up the global production of copper, cobalt, lithium, neodymium, manganese beyond global capacity. And then what about the carbon footprint that it takes to mine all of this metal and dig it out of the earth? The Green New Deal has a dirty little secret. The supply chain, I talked about container deadened, the ports of Los Angeles, Long Beach backed up. I was talking to or exchanging email with somebody who's in the cargo industry the other day, and she said that for the last 8 months, something strange is going on with the supply chain. It's not just emission standards for trucks getting into California. There's something else going on here. She said that one of the big rail companies that hauls freight from the rest of the country to the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles have not been accepting bookings for about the last 8 months. Truckers over the last 8 months or so, no, excuse me, the rail company, they stopped accepting bookings September 1st, but they say it's temporary, but they keep moving the expiration date back by a week. So it's been like 6 weeks now that the freight companies, the rail companies are not moving containers for export back to the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach. Truckers are not accepting export loads as readily as normal. This has been ongoing for the last 8 months or so. So the question this person raised, and again, this is somebody on the West Coast who can actually see the port from her office. Are these container ships pulling out of port? Are they sailing full? And if so, with what? Because it's her job to book cargo for export. And she said it's like pulling teeth. Bookings are being dropped, changed, reneged on without any notice and without any explanation. What is going on with the import-export business right now? And then when it comes to trying to propose some solutions here, the media, which normally I have learned that the definition of being a journalist in the corporate media here in America today is spinning every story so that it reflects well on the Democratic Party. They are not even trying to spin the stories right now. They are flat out telling us that the solution to the supply chain crisis, the solution to the empty shelves at Costco when you look down the toilet paper aisle, or I go to the Dollar General and look for batteries to for flashlights or whatever. It's like there's a lot of empty hooks in that battery display. It's usually full. The reason we have this problem, the solution to the problem, is that we, the middle class of America, are buying too much stuff, and we need to lower our expectations. That's the problem. The problem is not that somehow somebody behind the scenes has figured out that they can really drive us into into a sense of fear and trepidation by disrupting the supply of say holiday turkeys. It's our fault for expecting there to be fresh produce at the grocery store, like there always has been, at least in my lifetime. For us to expect that there will be items for the Black Friday sales that are soon to be, advertised on your television station near you. They're telling us, the New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, all ran stories like this, op-ed pieces within the last 10 days, telling us that the solution to the supply chain issue is to quit buying stuff. That's the problem. It's you. Wait a minute. I'm almost 60 years old, and for my entire life, advertising has been telling me I need to buy more stuff. In fact, wasn't that the whole purpose of the stimulus checks that they sent out to us when COVID hit? Was to tell us, here's $2,400, go out and buy stuff. Now they're saying it's our fault that there's a supply chain problem. It's not the fault of the emission standards that don't let the vehicles haul, that you need to haul the containers into the state, the place where the containers are. It's not that you're telling people who were on the front lines at hospitals and doctors' offices and the police who were out there in the middle of COVID when it was at its worst without any kind of vaccine, whether it worked or not. And now you're telling them they've got to take the experimental vaccine or they're fired. That's not the problem. The problem is us expecting to live a middle-class lifestyle. It just makes you ask, what is the end game? And again, I think what these threads are leading to is this sense, convincing all of us that something is fundamentally broken with our world. Now, as Christians, we know something is fundamentally broken. It's been ever since the garden. You're not ever going to hear that from the media, of course. You're not ever going to hear that from a politician. Hey, the problem is human sin. Yeah, good luck getting reelected, pal. The problem is that the globalists are trying to push us to accept their version of the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, this idea that the world is broken. It was broken because of our overconsumption. It's broken because we've poisoned Mother Earth. It's broken because of climate change, which is our fault, and it's broken because of the pandemic. And because of all of these things, there will never be a return to normal. That's the message that we're hearing here, and that's what I'm seeing in these themes of the stories that I've touched on over the last 45 minutes or so. They're trying to convince us that the only solution is a global government. When you've got groups of extremely wealthy investment banks lining up behind the World Economic Forum and says, yes, we need socialism. Wait a minute. You want to get rid of the system that made you obscenely rich? How does that work? And you're getting together with the Pope in this group that literally calls itself Guardians of Inclusive Capitalism. That sounds like a new entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How is it that we've got a group that includes a Rockefeller and a Rothschild led by a Jesuit Pope, and we're supposed to listen to them? I mean, come on. Alex Jones' head is exploding right now. But as Christians, the reason we can even laugh about this, at how absurd this is at playing out right in front of us, is because we know that this is the direction God saw this was going to go from the very beginning of time. Carl Gallups said something that just caught me by surprise the morning after the election, because Carl is as political as anybody. His weekly talk show down there in the Gulf Coast was all about the politics of the day, and he was very deep into showing the hard evidence that a certain former president was not a native-born American. But the morning after the election last year, Carl put something out on his social media site. He said, just keep this in mind. God did not wake up this morning, slap himself on the forehead and say, boy, I didn't see that coming. So the fact that it did happen suggests that God allowed it for some reason. And I will quote someone else who's smarter than me, and that is my wife. And she said, we in the church who went through Easter last year, probably the first Easter since the resurrection, where the church was not allowed by government authorities to gather on Resurrection Sunday, said, remember, we have not been destroyed. The church has been deployed. And our mission is still the same, which is to make disciples of all nations. Think about this. These fools actually believe that they are going to win. It's really sad when you think about it. They are trying to preempt God's great reset. The one who spoke the universe into existence has a great reset planned. Theirs pales by comparison. Yes, we know from Scripture that a day is coming when one identified as the Antichrist will rule over a global government. Now, Sharon and I, we are pre-tribulation believers, but really where the rapture falls, where Jesus Christ returns, doesn't really matter. The ultimate, the bottom line is that he comes back at the head of a heavenly army, and he puts all things right. So whether we're here through the tribulation or we're out of here before the tribulation, doesn't matter. Our job is to continue sharing the hope that we have in Jesus Christ with gentleness and respect, according to the Apostle Peter, so that no one can find fault in us. And this is where I preach to myself, because as you can see, I can get a little worked up about this, which is not normally how I go through my day. I'm not normally this kind of an emotional person in most of my interpersonal relationships. But when I see what's happening for those who have rejected the authority of God, it grinds on me a little bit. But they nailed him to a cross. So what can they do to me that they didn't do to him far worse? They can call me names. Ouch. Ow. Oh. They called Christ names too. And then they drove spikes through his wrist and his feet. There's a lot of stuff that happens before we get to the end, before the arrival of the Antichrist, before the unveiling of the mark. I don't think the vaccine is the mark, because when you look at Revelation 6, 7, 8, 9 through Revelation 12, where the beast finally emerges from the sea at the end of Revelation 12, beginning of Revelation 13, there's a lot of things that happen. Flaming mountain falls into the sea. Wormwood crashes into the earth. I think we'll notice those things. So we're not there yet, but this is how it's going to look. What's happened over the last 18 months, this is how the sequence will look before we get to that point. And again, I don't think we, the faithful, we who have placed our trust in Christ, will be here to see it. But if we are, it will be our job to point these things out to those around us. This is why this stuff is happening. We can get you out of here. It's our friend, the late Patrick Heron, who wrote the book, The Nephilim and the Pyramid of the Apocalypse. Brilliant title. He was called home to be with the Lord about 5 years ago. Patty Heron used to say, the bad news is the Titanic is sinking. The good news is there's room in the lifeboat. We are not more righteous than anyone around us. None of these people who are doing these things in rebellion against God are any worse than us on the scale by which God judges. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. The one thing we do know is where the lifeboat is and how to hand out the life jackets. So that's our mission. As we see things going on in the world that drive us nuts, is to remember that. Sharon pulls me in off the ledge about once a day. My friend Joe Horn, yeah, Catherine does the same for him. Joe will text me at 7:30 in the morning. Did you see what Fauci just did? Like, I haven't had my coffee yet, Joe. I haven't seen anything. But it doesn't change my mission for the day. So just bear that in mind. They've got a great reset planned. They're pushing us to accept it, but God has a greater reset coming. That's the one to keep our eyes on. May God bless you, and thank you for giving me this time.
Wow, Derek, thank you. Thank you so much. And God bless you for delivering that today. You were, I mean, that was inspired by Jesus. You were like on fire. I just so appreciate it. Mark Runyon has a question for you.
Sure.